You lost friends in your life. You had been betrayed by people. You had been stabbed one time emotionally, which you don't want even to think about it. And you had been set up at least twice. Mm-hmm. You are not lucky with politicians. You are not lucky with police people. You are not lucky with army people. You are not lucky with any person wearing uniform.
That's true.
You are not. And every time you get closer to these people, you will find out that the fairy tale turning into a nightmare. Please shuffle the cards. And cut the cards.
Cut them, okay?
This is number 0, and you are going for a great period of being exposed and being in front of the public. You had been in a lonely island for a long time, and you came back ready. And you will teach people things that they never even thought about. And you are few minutes away before hitting the jackpot. And when a person is so profoundly inside the ideas, he gets hurt. They feel threatened. I saw they succeeded from some time.
Until you reach a point where you don't care anymore.
Yeah.
When you reach that, then you take all their power away.
When you don't have nothing to lose. This is the key for your success. And that's what it shows simply.
Moving and shaking this morning, Martin Armstrong, who's responsible for one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history, well, he's back. He cheated investors out of $700 million and spent 11 years in prison. Now he's being praised by followers on the internet for his calls. Among his fans, commodities investor Jim Rogers, who praises Armstrong for his historical knowledge and insight. His website gets more than 200,000 views per month.
My dad was a single father. He did the best he could. He would take us to school, pick us up. He would take me horseback riding. He did all of that. You know, his work was more than just work. It was his passion. It was his purpose in life. During the nights where we were sleeping, he was working, you know. He just worked whenever he could, you know, whenever he had a free moment. If he was traveling, my grandmother was coming down on weekends and take us for a couple days.
When I first came out, I was initially told by one of my former employees. He says, "Oh, Marty, the industry's changed. You'll be lucky if 25 people show up." And I was totally surprised. People I hadn't seen in a long time flew in from all over the world. I asked them, I said, why'd you come all the way over here? A lot of them said, I just had to come to make sure it was really you.
He got out September, and he had the seminar. You know, it was just him. He had no one working for him. It was just him. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna have a seminar. I'm like, do you really think you're ready for this? Like, you just got out. I don't think he ever expected that kind of turnout, and he brought on Danielle just weeks before. And honestly, like, seeing him on that stage, it was just like he never skipped a beat.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Martin Armstrong. Martin's first brush with money was while working in a rare stamp and coin collection as a student. And this was a passion that created a teenage millionaire. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to introduce our special guest, Mr. Martin Armstrong.
Welcome to Philadelphia. I'm Martin Armstrong. We all know something is wrong. You just cannot borrow forever with no intention of paying anything back. The reason we have this crisis is because since World War II, they basically have just had this idea that they can borrow year after year after year, never have to pay a damn thing back. The only country ever actually paid anything was Romania in 1980. That's it. It's the only exception I have found since going back to 6000 BC.
The marketplace has had enough of government debt. They're the only people that never pay their money. Government debt is always regurgitated year after year after year. If you ever in Princeton, you want to stop by our office, we've got all the bonds from around the world.
All these bonds that defaulted, just to remind you what a sovereign debt default really is. I mean, try that yourself. Go to the bank and say, okay, fine, I want to borrow every month, €1,000. When are you going to pay back? Well, never. I mean, good luck. I mean, nobody would run their business this way or their life. Now what? Now we're at the point of a sovereign debt crisis. Who's going to bail them out? There isn't anybody left. This thing just reaches the edge and just goes boom. Yes, government exempts themselves from the law, basically assuming there's always going to be people there to tax. They just take it from you and give it to somebody else. Their problem comes when there are more people to pay than there are to tax. And our biggest crisis is that historically, these systems always collapse. When they're done with Europe, then they're going to look around and say, okay, who's next? I suspect it probably will be Japan. And then after that, then they'll turn to the dollar. It's all going to come to roost. Historically, nobody has ever beaten this clock once.
I met Martin way back in 1980. I attended one of his conferences in Princeton, New Jersey. At the time, he was making some unusual forecasts. He was actually forecasting that there would be a crash in the stock markets in 1987. And he was forecasting that years ahead of time. And it was outrageous because nobody was possibly contemplating the kinds of things that he was talking about. And in October of 1987, lo and behold, the stock markets had one of their worst collapses ever. And as the market was collapsing, he also put out a report saying that the markets would recover by the end of 1989 to new highs. And everybody thought he was nuts. And by 1989, the stock market in the United States was at new record highs. It was uncanny. Now here's a man who I believe in my heart did absolutely nothing wrong. And I can tell you, even if he did, he didn't deserve the treatment that he received.
They said in the paper, said they stole so many billions of dollars. He said, I didn't do any of that, Mom. I didn't steal nothing, he said. When he was young, just going to school, he decided to save coins. So every time I would go shopping and he came home from school, he'd say, can I go through your change, Mom? And he'd empty my purse and pick out what coins he wanted. In a while there, he was collecting a lot of them. So I said, this coin collection is going to belong to you and me. And then my husband would see how much money he would make on his own. He didn't want to go to college. Why do I have to go? Look at the money I can make. His father said, you got to do something. You're not just going to quit school. So then he enrolled him in RCA computer store.
This teacher I had showed us this monstrous machine, and it was about half the size of this room. And he said, before you're going to be able to graduate, you're going to have to know every part in this whole thing. And you just looked at it and you said, no way. And I had a history professor who one day put on this movie. And this one really blew my mind. Jim Fisk manipulating the gold market in 1869. And he goes to his girlfriend and he says, Josie, gold's 162.
Josie! Jim! Look, Josie, 162 and a half.
And I'm thinking, come on, it's 35 bucks. So I went down to the libraries, and there it is, in 1869, gold 162 bucks. Obviously, that whole linear idea that I was raised with wasn't true. Everything went like this, and even over the centuries. And my father was a very conservative guy, said, you're speculating too much with those commodity things. You should put your money into the stock market. So I listened to my father. I bought Fidelity Trend at the top at about 54 bucks and watched it go to about $7. And I turned to my father and said, is this the way conservative people make their money? So then I'm really starting to say, what makes that happen? Imagine a computer that actually learns and remembers. Suddenly that huge machine began to make sense. I thought I could create a system that stores the knowledge of a century and uses it to predict the future.
I met Marty about 40 years ago. He had a coin business in Robbinsville, New Jersey. He was in business at the mall at that time. I was here. I just built a shopping center. We were very competitive with each other. He would put an ad in, I would raise the price, he would raise the price. But it was just a way of doing things. You know, it was nothing personal, it was just business. And then from the coin business, he went into the gold business. He had a big built-in vault. I remember that. That was impressive. And you could see it from the outside.
Virtually everything in history is documented by the coinage. And there's one thing interesting about the coinage. The buildings crumble, paper gets lost, coins have survived. We largely took each coin, we had them tested and weighed, and then you have a database of something going back 6,000 years.
Marty was very generous to the people that worked for him at Christmas time and things like that. about an hour before I closed on Christmas Eve, but he would come in, he'd be like a madman. I'll take that, and I'll take that, and I'll take that. Exceptionally nice gifts and presents for his family and his employees. A very, very generous person. But Marty never thought small anyway. Everything he did was always first class, I think.
Our company has grown by developing databases on virtually everything. We have every possible currency, even Indian rupees, on a daily basis, at least back to 1900.
We had like 240 people writing down prices, and we let the computer search absolutely everything in the world. These numbers, for some strange reason, they're all interconnected. You can follow it like a ballet. It's like a Shakespeare's play. Played for hundreds of years, the actors change, but the plot's always the same. And then I discovered list of financial panics, 26 events of panics over a 224-year period. So you divide that by those 26 events, and it was 8.6. And that was pi. 3,141 days in that 8.6 years. Which then builds up into 6 waves of 51.6 years. 6 waves of those build up into major waves of like 309 years. Oh my God, it's actually the perfect cycle.
Pick up the crabs. What were you playing? Do you want to have a game? Ninjas. Nothing very much.
I met Marty in the Princeton office in Tokyo. We were discussing his vision. From his history of going back through the coins and all the movement that he's found, it led him to this model and this idea. Here we are, we've got a pattern, we've got identified a cycle, and we've put that cycle over the top of finance. I've been working in IT since I was 13, 14 years old, and Marty's the same thing. He's come along from that area as someone who understands computers all the way through.
His understanding of the concept of pi and how it might be at work in the rhythms of society was completely uncanny. They were signals that were issued to the dime.
Here it is.
I'm rolling.
My name is Mike Campbell. If you're a mother or a father, I want to talk to you for a moment. Unfortunately, there are way too many examples, from asking the younger generation to pay off the massive debts building up both federally and provincially. And the last thing your kids and my kids need is transfer of wealth from younger Canadians to older Canadians. My name is Mike Campbell. Join me Saturday for Money Talks.
In the early 1980s, friends of mine said you should come and hear Martin Armstrong. He predicted the top in the Nikkei index in December of 1989, in writing very clearly, but he also phoned me that day. And he phoned me the day, he said, I just wanted you to know the Nikkei index has hit its high for your lifetime today, and it's going from 39,000 to 8,000. Obviously, that prediction was correct. So his reputation continued to grow, especially in Asia and Japan, where he had been absolutely correct in his call of these major moves. So that's why his business grew. It was because he had been accurate.
Princeton Economics gained international fame in the early 80s for his forecasting. I knew that he was consulting with some very big corporations in Japan.
我が社のプリンストンセミナーもですね、恒例となりまして、今回で14回目を迎えました。
He was very widely followed in the Japanese community. It seemed as if the entire trading community would scramble to see his signals as soon as they were released. And they would act on them because they were 99% of the time completely accurate.
I'd like to introduce Lady Thatcher
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here. We don't necessarily think in cycles in politics, perhaps we should. You must learn the lessons of history. Otherwise, you might be condemned to repeat its mistakes.
We had one client, and the computer came up and said, look, Deutschmark's going to make a new low. Yen was not. So I called him on the phone, and I said, look, it's going to start flipping right away, and I suggest you get out. And he asked me, he says, well, you know, how? I said, just get out the market. And I left the office, and by the time I got home, this thing is going to go ballistic. My phone was practically melting down. Oh my God, and this client just got killed. So I called him on the phone, and I said, hey, did you get out? And he starts laughing. He says, yes, that was me. I said, what do you mean it was you? And he says, that was me. I said, how many contracts did you have? He had 40,000 contracts on each side. And I'm thinking, oh my God. I'm thinking the ninjas are going to come into my office at this point. This is all in the early 80s, where we're still trying to figure out how this stuff works. I said, look, I have to know at this point. I mean, what am I advising on here?